Welcome back, everybody. Really glad to have you with us for another deep dive. Last time we were exploring the Greco-Persian Wars,
Oh, yeah.
those clashes that really set the stage for ancient Greece. We talked about how, after some initial stumbles, the Greeks rallied
Mm-hmm.
and took back key cities like Miletus. Well, we're sticking with ancient Greece for this deep dive, but this time we're going beyond the battlefields and into the realm of
They're
ideas.
very cool.
Talking about those pioneers of Western philosophy, the
Yeah.
brilliant minds who emerged from Miletus and really shook things up.
Yeah.
And get this, we're going to uncover some surprising connections
No.
between Greek thought and other civilizations,
Mm.
challenging that whole Eurocentric narrative.
Well, what's often overlooked is that these early thinkers,
Yeah,
they weren't just, theorizing in isolation. They were products of their time and place,
right.
grappling with real-world issues, political upheavals, cultural shifts.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how their ideas reflected
Yeah.
and even shaped the world around them.
Okay, so before we jump into the specifics,
Sure.
let's take a step back. When we say philosophy,
Right.
what exactly are we talking about? It can seem a bit daunting, right?
Mhm.
All those big questions about existence and the meaning of life.
It's true. Philosophy often gets a bad rap for being too abstract or heady. But at its core, it's really about that fundamental human desire to understand the world around us. That love of wisdom, that drive to question, to explore,
Yeah.
to go beyond the surface and dig into the deeper meaning of things.
Right, it's not just about accepting what we're told.
Yeah.
We're about using logic and reason to figure things out for ourselves.
Yeah.
Kind of like what those early Greek philosophers were doing, right?
Yeah.
They weren't content with the traditional explanations.
Yeah.
They wanted to find their own answers.
Exactly. And Bertrand Russell,
Okay.
a prominent 20th century philosopher, he captured this essence beautifully. He described philosophy as this no man's land between science and theology, constantly under attack from both sides.
No man's land, huh? That sounds kind of intense.
Oh.
So philosophy is like this rebel, caught between the realms of scientific proof and religious faith.
It's a powerful analogy. What Russell is highlighting is that philosophy isn't bound by the limits of scientific knowledge
Right.
or the constraints of religious dogma. It ventures beyond the observable,
Right.
delving into questions that science might not yet have the tools to answer, and that religion might address through faith alone. And as you said, it uses reason and logic as its primary tools.
So it's not about blind acceptance.
Right.
It's about critical thinking,
Mm,
questioning assumptions, and really examining the evidence.
exactly.
For those early Greek thinkers, one of the biggest questions they tackled was, what is everything made of? What's that fundamental building block of reality?
It's the quintessential question, isn't it? And it's fascinating to see how they approached it. Take Thales of Miletus, often considered the father of Western philosophy. His answer, water.
Water.
Yeah.
Seriously. Like everything we see, everything we are is just water in different forms.
I know it sounds a bit simplistic to our modern ears. But remember, Thales was observing the world around him, trying to make sense of the patterns and transformations he saw. Water was essential for life. It could take on different states, solid, liquid, gas.
Right.
And it seemed to be everywhere. So in a way, it made sense to him as this fundamental principle.
Okay, I can see where he was coming from. But what's really interesting is that this idea of water as a fundamental element wasn't unique to Greece, right? I seem to remember something about ancient Chinese philosophy having a similar concept.
You're absolutely right. Around the same time that Thales was pondering the nature of water, the Chinese philosopher Guan Zhang also proposed that all things arise from water. Now, they were geographically and culturally worlds apart. So it's not a case of one influencing the other directly, but it does raise some intriguing questions, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you wonder if there were some underlying commonalities
Right.
in how humans, regardless of location or culture, perceived the world and sought to understand its essence.
And that brings me to a point I want to emphasize. The question I often get is, does China have philosophy? And the answer is a resounding yes. Any civilization that contemplates the nature of existence,
Right.
that seeks to unravel the mysteries of the universe, and our place in it, engages in philosophical thought.
It's like saying only certain cultures have the capacity to look up at the stars and wonder what's out there. Of
Exactly.
course not. That sense of awe and that drive to understand are universal.
Right.
But okay, back to Greece. Did all the philosophers agree with Thales about water being the fundamental element?
Oh, not at all. That's the beauty of philosophy. It thrives on debate, on challenging assumptions and exploring different perspectives. So we have Anaximenes, also from Miletus, who argued for air as the fundamental principle. Then there's Heraclitus, who focused on fire, emphasizing the constant change and flux of the universe.
So it's kind of like a philosophical battle royale with each thinker championing their element of choice. Were there any other contenders in this cosmic competition?
We can't forget Pythagoras, who we'll talk about more later, but he believed it was all about numbers, that mathematical harmony and ratios were the underlying principles of the universe. And then there's Democritus, who came up with a truly revolutionary idea: atoms.
Wait, atoms? Like those tiny particles we learned about in science class? Are you telling me that ancient Greeks already had that figured out?
Well, not exactly as we understand them today, but Democritus proposed that everything was made up of these indivisible, unbreakable particles called atoms moving around in empty space, what he called the void. He even had this idea that atoms would sort of seek out their companions, combining in different ways to form all the substances we see. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? To think over 2,000 years ago, Democritus was already envisioning a universe built on these tiny, indivisible particles.
Yeah, and what's even more remarkable is that similar ideas were emerging in other parts of the world.
Oh, really?
Around the same time.
Wow.
So it's not like Democritus was this lone genius who suddenly discovered the atom.
Right.
It was more like a collective realization, a convergence of thought across different cultures.
Precisely. In ancient India, for example, the philosopher Mahavira described atoms as paramanu, these ultimate indivisible units of matter.
Interesting.
And the Chinese philosopher Mosey also developed an atomic theory remarkably similar to Democritus's, with indivisible particles and even theorizing about the smallest possible unit of time.
It really challenges that narrative that all knowledge flows from a single source. It's more like these brilliant minds separated by vast distances were all tapping into some fundamental truth about the universe.
It speaks to the interconnectedness of human thought, doesn't it? That despite our differences in culture and location, we're all ultimately seeking to answer the same profound questions about the nature of reality. But let's get back to Greece for a moment. We can't talk about early philosophy without mentioning Pythagoras.
Oh yeah, Pythagoras. Most people know him from the Pythagorean theorem in math.
Exactly.
A squared plus b squared equals c squared. That one took me a while to wrap my head around back in school.
It's a classic.
But I get the feeling he was more than just a math whiz, right?
Much more. Remember how we were talking about the essence of everything? Well, for Pythagoras, it all came down to numbers. He saw mathematical harmony and ratios as the underlying principle of the universe. And he wasn't entirely wrong. Mathematics underpins so much of how the world works, from the orbits of planets to the structure of music.
So he was kind of like a proto-scientist using math to unlock the secrets of nature. That's very impressive for someone living over 2,500 years ago.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Pythagoras was also one of the first to propose that the Earth was spherical.
A spherical Earth. Wow, that's a pretty radical idea for back then. I mean, most people probably assumed the world was flat. Was there any evidence to support his theory, or was it just pure speculation?
There's evidence to suggest that he based his idea on astronomical observations. He noticed, for example, that ships sailing over the horizon seemed to disappear hull first, suggesting a curvature of the Earth's surface. And he was aware of lunar eclipses, where the Earth's shadow on the moon appeared round.
So he was piecing together these clues using logic and observation to arrive at a truly groundbreaking conclusion. It really shows how these early philosophers were pushing the boundaries of knowledge, challenging conventional wisdom, and laying the foundation for scientific inquiry. But hold on, didn't we start this deep dive talking about Miletus?
Yeah.
We've been bouncing around between different thinkers and locations. Could we connect the dots a bit?
Absolutely. You're right. We started with Miletus, this bustling port city on the coast of Asia Minor.
Right.
And it's significant because Miletus was a melting pot of cultures and ideas. It was a center of trade with connections to Egypt, Persia, and other parts of the ancient world. And this exposure to different perspectives likely played a role in fostering the intellectual ferment that gave rise to these early philosophers.
So it's like Miletus was this crucible of innovation, a place where different ways of thinking collided and sparked new ideas.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about the individual brilliance of thinkers like Thales or Anaximenes.
Right.
It was the environment itself that nurtured their intellectual curiosity.
Yeah. Exactly. And this brings us to another important point.
All right.
The idea that these early philosophers weren't from the heart of Athenian democracy, but from the periphery.
Yeah.
These colonial outposts like Miletus.
So there's something to be said for being a bit removed from the center of power.
Yeah.
Maybe having a bit more freedom to think outside the box.
It's a fascinating possibility, isn't it? Perhaps being on the fringes of the established power structures allowed for more intellectual freedom, less pressure to conform to traditional ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And this might explain why Miletus became such a hotbed of philosophical inquiry.
It makes me think about how revolutionary ideas often emerge from unexpected places, from those who are willing to question the status quo and challenge the accepted norms. But eventually, the center of intellectual gravity shifted to Athens, right? What sparked that transition?
Well, several factors were at play, but one key figure stands out: Pericles.
Pericles.
He ushered in what's often called the Golden Age of Athens, a period of unprecedented cultural, political, and intellectual flourishing.
Okay, so Pericles, Athens, the Golden Age. It sounds like things are out to get pretty epic. But before we dive into all that, can we take a quick step back and talk about Pericles himself? Who was this guy and what made him so influential?
Pericles was a remarkable figure, a brilliant orator, a skilled general, and a shrewd politician who dominated Athenian politics for over 3 decades. He was deeply committed to Athenian democracy
Wow.
and implemented reforms that gave more citizens a voice in government. He also spearheaded ambitious building projects like the Parthenon that transformed the cityscape and solidified Athens' prestige.
So he was kind of like a visionary leader, someone who had a clear vision for Athens and the drive to make it a reality. But how does this tie back to philosophy? Was Pericles himself a philosopher?
He wasn't a philosopher in the traditional sense, but he was deeply influenced by philosophical thought. In fact, one of his teachers was the philosopher Zeno, famous for his mind-bending paradoxes.
Paradoxes, like those logic puzzles that twist your brain into knots.
Exactly. One of Zeno's most famous is the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. It goes like this. Achilles, the legendary Greek hero known for his speed, is in a race against a tortoise. The tortoise gets a head start, and Zeno argues that Achilles can never actually catch up.
Wait, how is that possible? Achilles is way faster than a tortoise.
That's the point of the paradox. Zeno argues that by the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise started, the tortoise has moved a bit further ahead. And by the time Achilles reaches that point, the tortoise has moved ahead again, and so on, infinitely.
So even though Achilles is much faster, he's eternally stuck chasing this slowpoke tortoise. That doesn't seem right.
It highlights the limits of our understanding of motion, continuity, and infinity.
Right.
It forces us to question our assumptions and to think more deeply about seemingly simple concepts. And that's the power of a paradox. It shakes up our thinking and opens up new avenues of exploration.
Okay, I have to admit, that's pretty clever. But getting back to Pericles, how did this exposure to philosophical thought shape his leadership and his vision for Athens? So Pericles, a leader steeped in philosophical thinking, takes the helm in Athens. It sounds like a recipe for some pretty dramatic changes. Did his approach to leadership reflect these philosophical influences?
Absolutely. Pericles' emphasis on reason, logic, and critical thinking, all hallmarks of philosophical inquiry, permeated his approach to governance. He believed in empowering citizens to participate in decision-making, fostering a culture of debate and discussion, and he saw Athens as a beacon of intellectual freedom, a place where ideas could be freely explored and challenged.
So it wasn't just about imposing his own views. It was about creating a space where different perspectives could flourish. It sounds like a pretty radical concept for the time, especially compared to those more authoritarian regimes that were common back then.
It was revolutionary, and this intellectual openness had a profound impact on Athenian society. Under Pericles' leadership, Athens became a magnet for artists, writers, and thinkers from across the Greek world. It was during this period that we see the flowering of Athenian drama, with playwrights like Sophocles exploring complex philosophical themes through their tragedies.
Okay, so we've got philosophy shaping political leadership, and now we're seeing it influencing art and culture as well. It really shows how these ideas weren't just confined to academia. They were permeating every aspect of Athenian life. Tell me more about Sophocles. What made his plays so groundbreaking?
Sophocles was a master storyteller, but his plays weren't just entertaining spectacles. They delved into profound questions about fate, free will, justice, and the human condition. Take Oedipus Rex, for example. It's the story of a man who, despite his best intentions, is fated to kill his father and marry his mother, fulfilling a prophecy he desperately tried to avoid.
It sounds intense. It's like a dramatic exploration of that age-old question, are we masters of our own destiny, or are our lives predetermined by forces beyond our control?
Exactly. And what's so brilliant about Sophocles' work is that he doesn't offer easy answers. He presents these complex dilemmas, these moral and philosophical quandaries, and invites the audience to grapple with them.
It's amazing to think that these plays written over 2,500 years ago are still relevant and thought-provoking today. They speak to those universal human experiences, those timeless questions about who we are, why we suffer, and what it means to live a meaningful life.
And it speaks to the enduring power of art to engage with philosophical ideas, to make them accessible to a wider audience, and to spark dialogue across time and cultures.
So we've journeyed from the bustling port of Miletus, where those early philosophical rebels challenged the status quo, to the heart of Athens during its golden age, where leaders like Pericles embraced reason and intellectual freedom, and playwrights like Sophocles explored the depths of the human experience through art. It's been quite a ride.
And what's so striking is how interconnected it all is. We see those threads of philosophical inquiry woven through politics, art, culture, and even everyday life in ancient Athens. It wasn't just an abstract pursuit, it was a way of life, a way of engaging with the world and grappling with the big questions that define our existence.
And it's a reminder that these ideas weren't just confined to ancient Greece. As we saw with Thales and Guan Zhang, similar questions were being pondered in other parts of the world. It challenges that narrow view of history that often focuses on a single narrative.
Precisely. It's a reminder that the history of human thought is a tapestry woven from diverse perspectives and interconnected ideas. And if those ancient thinkers, with their limited tools and knowledge, could make such groundbreaking discoveries about atoms, the shape of the earth, and the complexities of human nature, it makes you wonder what other revolutionary ideas might we be overlooking both in the past and in the present.
It's a call to action, isn't it? To stay curious, to keep questioning, to challenge our assumptions, and to never underestimate the power of human ingenuity, no matter where it originates. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the world of ancient Greek philosophy. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
The pleasure was all ours. Until next time, keep seeking wisdom and keep asking those big questions.